Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Misfits Season 4. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. In the previous season's cliffhanger, a medium summoned back the people the Misfits had killed. The virtue leader killed Alicia in retaliation. To save her, Simon traveled back in time, setting off a new cycle of events. Now, the story picks up again. On this day, two new juvenile offenders arrive at the rehabilitation center, a dopey guy named Finn and a sharp, street-smart girl named Jess. Since the new probation officer hasn't officially started yet, Rudy pretends to be in charge and tricks the two into picking up trash by the river, his real motive being to keep them away from discovering the group's secret. Meanwhile, Seth, the superpower dealer, is in the basement interrogating a mysterious man called Michael. With a twisted expression, Seth tries to force a briefcase code out of him, but Michael stubbornly refuses to talk. Just then, Rudy calls. Seth leaves to meet him, but warns him to be cautious around the newcomers. Just to be safe, Seth returns to ask Michael whether he's had any contact with them before walking off again. Later, Jess returns to the center and hears noises coming from the locker room. Curious, she peeks inside and catches Rudy rummaging through lockers in a panic. Flustered, he blurts out that he's just looking for a sandwich, a lie so weak it only deepens Jess's suspicion. She quietly follows his smelly butt, eventually watching him slip into a locked room in the basement. Determined to uncover the truth, Jess uses her X-ray-like power to see through the walls and discovers someone locked in a freezer, possibly naked in her peeping eyes. She rushes to tell Finn, who wants no part in the drama. Jess tries to convince him to help, but their conversation is cut short when Rudy suddenly shows up. After thinking it over, Jess decides to free the person in the freezer on her own. As Rudy examines a brand new chainsaw in the office, the fire alarm suddenly goes off. He runs out to investigate. Jess grabs Finn, sneaks into the office, steals the keys, and unlocks the basement freezer, only to find Curtis inside. As soon as he regains consciousness, he frantically asks about the briefcase. When he realizes neither of them has any idea what he's talking about, he bolts. Rudy returns to the basement after shutting off the alarm and finds Curtis has been freed. He scolds the two, saying they've made a huge mistake. Jess, increasingly confused and suspicious, demands to know what's really going on. Pressed for answers, Rudy reluctantly gives them 2 drinks and spins a half-true, half-made-up story. Flashback to the day before. Curtis, Rudy, and Seth were chatting in the rehabilitation center. Seth had just returned from a trip to Africa with Kelly. While there, in a war-torn country, they came across a young boy frozen in place after stepping on a landmine. Thanks to Kelly's background as a rocket specialist, she easily defused it. Inspired, she decided to stay and help clear the minefield, while Seth returned home to grab some supplies before heading back to rejoin her. That's when a stranger burst into the center, collapsed at their stinky feet, and clutched a briefcase. When they helped him up, a green light briefly flashed across each of them. Clearly, this man, whose name is Michael, was also a superpowered individual. But what effect did that mysterious touch have? That remains to be seen. Judging by Michael's reaction, whatever's in that briefcase is clearly worth a fortune, but it's locked with a code that none of them could crack. They decided to wait until Michael regained consciousness to ask him directly. Distrustful of each other, the trio all chose to sleep at the center that night, each worried the others might try to steal the case. The next day, they woke to find that Michael's hand had been sawed off and the briefcase was gone. Each of them suspected the other two, but no matter who took it, the briefcase was still useless without the code. Seth suggested they work together to search the rehab center for the missing case before Michael regained consciousness. While the others searched, Rudy secretly pulled Curtis aside. He proposed they take out one of the competitors. Whispering conspiratorially, Rudy claimed Seth was a sneaky backstabber who constantly badmouthed him behind his back, and that Seth must have stolen the case. He suggested they deal with Seth first. Rudy's storytelling was abruptly interrupted by Jess and Finn. His lie quickly unraveled. If he and Curtis had been plotting together, why had Curtis ended up locked in the freezer? Cornered, Rudy finally came clean. He admitted that he'd snuck out in the middle of the night, sawed off Michael's hand himself, and claimed the briefcase for himself. But just as he was about to leave with it, he heard a chicken noise in the distance and went to investigate whether there was any chicken girl. When he came back, the case was gone, and the person helping him that night hadn't been Curtis. It had been Seth. Suspecting Curtis knew where the case had gone, Rudy drugged his drink, knocked him out, and stuffed him in the freezer, planning to keep him there until he talked. Rudy also confessed he believed the 2 dumb new delinquents who showed up that morning were Curtis's backup. It dawned on Jess that Rudy had been suspicious of her and Finn the entire time, and that his whole rambling story had just been a way to stall. Sure enough, the drug kicked in. Finn and Jess both passed out cold. Rudy tossed them into the freezer. With the pair dealt with, Rudy joined forces with Seth to interrogate Michael, but no matter what they tried, he refused to talk, not even a single piece of bullshit. Eventually, they gave up and locked Michael in the freezer too, now sharing the freezing space with Jess and Finn. Jess was shivering and on the verge of freezing to death. Desperate, she asked Michael what the briefcase was all about. She wanted to die knowing the truth. At last, Michael gave in. He used to be a robber. After a big heist, he betrayed his partners during the split and kept the mysterious briefcase full of all the money for himself. But then came the storm, an event that changed everything. Ever since, anyone who touched him became obsessed with the money, willing to do anything to get it. Even his wife and kids turned on him. His life was completely destroyed. That absurd superpower had made everyone he cared about into enemies. Meanwhile, Rudy and Seth, now under the same supernatural influence, began scheming against each other. Rudy tried to drug Seth too, but Seth saw through it. He pretended to fall for it, then sucker-punched Rudy the moment he let his guard down and walked out of the office. But Rudy had a trick up his sleeve. His superpower was cloning himself. As the real Rudy hit the floor, his clone stepped out from the shadows. Holding the keys, the clone headed to the basement and freed Jess and Finn. Unfortunately, the moment they saw him, they thought he was the original Rudy and beat the crap out of him before he could explain. To prove he wasn't the same Rudy, the clone led them to the briefcase. The night before, after finishing some chores at home, the clone had been about to merge back with his original self when he saw the real Rudy walk away from the briefcase. That's when he saw Michael secretly stashing it. The clone brought Jess and Finn to the hiding spot and found the case. But just as they grabbed it, things took a turn. Having been locked up with Michael long enough, both Jess and Finn had started falling under the same greedy spell. They each grabbed a nearby object and squared off, ready to fight. Finn, trying to help, used his telekinesis to move a flower pot on a shelf, but his powers were so weak that after straining for ages, he barely nudged it an inch, utterly useless in a real fight. Still, while everyone was distracted by the hovering flower pot, Finn snatched the case from the clone Rudy and bolted. But as he turned a corner, Curtis and Seth appeared out of nowhere, blocking his path. Behind him, Rudy and Jess came running. Now completely surrounded, Finn was chased all the way to the rooftop. Everyone was wild-eyed and crazed, desperate to get their hands on the money in that briefcase. Just then, Michael suddenly appeared and lunged at Finn, the two of them grappling in a wild scuffle. In the chaos, Michael lost his footing and fell from the rooftop. With his death, the strange power he held vanished, and everyone immediately came to their senses. The obsession with the briefcase disappeared like a bad dream. Calmly and efficiently, they buried the body and returned to the rehab center. Waiting at the gate was their new probation officer, Greg, who looked like someone you really didn't want to mess with. Finn tried to ask for time off to go home and take care of his dog, but Greg wasn't having it. He gave Finn a brutal verbal lashing and issued a stern warning to everyone. If any of them tried to stir up trouble, he'd make sure they knew what it felt like to have your smelly butt turned into a fragrant sunflower. No one took his threats too seriously, though. After all, Rudy and his crew had a reputation for breaking probation officers, and as innocent as the new recruits might look, they were anything but soft. When Finn rushed home, we finally saw what his pet dog really was, a sexy woman tied to the bed who turned out to be his girlfriend, Sadie. For reasons still unclear, she was bound hand and foot with her mouth taped shut and could only communicate through a voice synthesizer. Suddenly, Sadie asked Finn to perform a hormone yoga session. As he eagerly leaned in and started to help her, she locked his head between her thighs. Finn barely escaped, only by using his telekinesis to hurl a cup at her head. Meanwhile, back at the rehab center, Rudy was cramming his belongings into a locker, having just been evicted for not paying rent. He tried asking to crash at either Curtis's or Jess's place, but got a firm no from both. Later, Officer Greg assigned the group a new task, posing as models for a blind sculptor at a school. While working, Rudy and Curtis both spotted a gorgeous, curvy girl and raced to be her model. Curtis got there first, leaving Rudy stuck, having his face gently caressed by a male sculptor. That night at the bar, Rudy grumbled to Curtis, wanting to settle the modeling role with a round of rock, paper, scissors. Just then, Seth showed up to say goodbye. He'd be returning to Africa after packing up Kelly's things the next day. During the conversation, Curtis accidentally let slip that Seth had a rare ability. He could absorb other people's powers. Finn overheard and panicked. He rushed home to tell Sadie he'd found someone who could take powers from others. Their lives were finally about to turn around. Just as he was breaking the news, there was a knock at the door. It was Rudy. With nowhere to stay and everyone else turning him down, he'd come to Finn's place. Despite Finn's best efforts to keep Rudy away and protect his secret, Rudy refused to leave. When persuasion didn't work, he simply barged in. Helpless, Finn ended up letting Rudy crash in his room. Finn's worries weren't unfounded. That night, Rudy got up to use the bathroom and overheard Finn talking to someone inside the heavily padlocked room. The next morning, he saw Finn carrying a bucket of waste out of that same room, leaving Rudy with no doubt that something suspicious was going on. He told the others the next day, and they couldn't help but recall how Finn had always claimed he had a pet dog to take care of. A chill ran down everyone's spine all the way to their butts. Just then, Greg ran over to tell Curtis that the pretty blind girl from yesterday had requested a new model. Curtis, confused about what he had done wrong, went to confront her, only to be hit with, she didn't want to be around people like him. Cursing under his breath, Curtis swapped modeling duties with Rudy and told him what had happened. But Rudy, clearly blinded by attraction, didn't believe a word of it. He insisted the girl had to be a good person. Elsewhere, Finn caught Seth while he was packing and begged him to help remove someone's superpower. But Seth said he was done with all that. At that moment, the others entered the locker room, and Rudy declared he already knew what Finn was hiding. Backed into a corner, Finn finally confessed. His first love, Sadie, was perfect in every way, except she was incredibly controlling. After the storm gave her supernatural powers, she could turn him into the ideal boyfriend with just a word. No smoking, no drinking, no video games, and total obedience. What's worst, she had a fetish for oral attention, and his smelly mouth would keep going until his jaw cramped, literally. Finn only managed to escape when she went on a trip with friends. In fear of falling under her spell again, he had locked her up while searching for a solution. After hearing the story, the group suddenly understood and sympathized. Rudy, however, had believed there was a talking dog in the room, so he had sent his clone to secretly check. It was a mistake. Sure enough, when they rushed back to Finn's house, it was too late. The clone had let Sadie go. He even tried accusing Finn of being a monster until Rudy explained the full story. Only then did his clone realize he'd screwed up. Now the only thing to do was make it right by finding Sadie. The clone Rudy told Finn that Sadie had trouble walking due to being tied up for so long, but she still pushed herself to leave the house. Hearing that, Finn was crushed, convinced she'd never come back. To lift his spirits, Rudy took him to a bar and tried to cheer him up. Just then, the gorgeous blind girl from earlier walked into the bar. Rudy immediately ditched Finn to go flirt with her. Meanwhile, Jess was eyeing the cute bartender, Alex. No matter how she tried to charm him, he stayed cool and distant. Seeing this, Curtis pulled her aside and said a bunch of girls had hit on Alex before, and he turned them all down, so he thought Alex might be gay. Rudy, on the other hand, hit it off with the blind girl quickly. That very night, she invited him back to her place for some sweaty hormone exercise. At the same time, Finn, still heartbroken, sat in the bar chatting with Jess. With both of them licking their wounds from romantic rejection, they started to bond. Finn even ended up at her place for drinks, conversation, and a sleepover. The next day, Sadie returned to Finn's home, only to find the messy and unkempt Rudy. Disgusted, she kicked him out. When Rudy returned to the rehab center dragging his suitcase, he ran into Finn. The moment Rudy told him Sadie was back, Finn rushed home. There, he and Sadie had a huge fight. Finn accused her of controlling his will. She shot back that she was only trying to make him a better person. She said that if he just listened, he'd actually be better off. In the end, Sadie lost hope and asked for a breakup. Finn packed up and left, but only got a few steps out the door before turning back. He begged for another chance. Softened by emotion, Sadie forgave him. Passion reignited, the two retreated to the bedroom for a round of exercise. Fantastic, but fast. 2 minutes later, they finished, and Finn went back to his old habits, cleaning himself with Sadie's skirt. Furious, she used her power again, and just like that, he was once again the perfect boyfriend, calling regularly, buying gifts, and always home on time. Jess, sensing something was off, realized Finn was under her control again. She tracked down Seth and asked for help. Just before leaving for Africa, Seth agreed to help one last time, removing Sadie's powers and freeing Finn from her spell. Now finally himself again, Finn apologized to Sadie one last time. The two realized they were just too different to be together. Since Sadie had paid for the place, Finn chose to move out. He and Rudy decided to bunk together at the rehab center. It wasn't perfect, but at least they had each other for company. One day, Curtis ran into a stunning woman by the vending machine. It turns out she was the new intern probation officer. Curtis was instantly smitten and tried to hit on her, but she brushed him off with a mysterious smile and walked away. The scene shifts to Rudy casually strumming a ukulele in a jail cell. Why's he in prison? It turns out this is just one of Rudy's alter egos, a darker version nicknamed Evil Rudy. Today's his release day. With his ukulele and 3 chocolate bars in tow, he hops into a taxi and heads straight for the rehab center. Meanwhile, the real Rudy and his other alter ego, the clone, are enjoying their morning coffee and admiring the fine weather until evil Rudy shows up. Rudy and his clone get into a ridiculous argument over a toothbrush, and just as the clone storms out, evil Rudy walks in. At first, Rudy thinks his alter ego just came back, but when he sees the ukulele, he realizes something's off. Evil Rudy is the manifestation of his dark side. At first, the three personalities coexisted peacefully. Evil Rudy even helped out with dirty work. But over time, his sadistic nature scared the other two. Eventually, they tricked him into stealing chocolate bars and secretly called the cops on him. Now, Evil Rudy's back for revenge and wants control of the body. He hands Rudy a chocolate bar as a threat. Rudy, terrified, accepts it. Evil Rudy then forcibly takes over, and it shows. Rudy's expression shifts from terrified to cold and sinister. Elsewhere, Finn takes Jess with him to pick up an old TV from his stepmom's house. But his stepmom seems to have unusual feelings for him, constantly throwing her heavy body at him. Jess just watches the chaos unfold, thoroughly entertained. Finn plays dumb and manages to escape her greasy grasp. He and Jess bring the TV back to the rehab center where Evil Rudy is getting the lay of the land. He immediately becomes interested in Jess and, unlike the others, goes straight to prying into her stuff, literally breaking open her locker to find if there was any sex toy hidden there. But he finds a photo of her with someone and bluntly confesses his feelings, analyzing her entire relationship history like a psychoanalyst. Although creepily accurate, Jess is clearly put off and tells him flat out there's no way they're getting together. As she tries to leave, Evil Rudy grabs her arm and claims her tough act is all a front, that deep down, she's fragile. Jess's face darkens. She shakes him off and heads out, intending to leave the center altogether. But Finn catches her just as she's changing. He forgot the remote for the TV and needs her to drive him back. Reluctantly, Jess agrees. This time she waits in the car while Finn goes inside. But his stepmom is even thirstier than before. She brings up the time he used her stinky underwear for self-pleasure and, getting way too excited, pulls down his pants and gives him tongue massage on the spot. 2 minutes later, when he finishes, Finn finally comes to his senses, makes up an excuse, and bolts to the car, urging Jess to leave quickly. But the stepmom chases after them, yelling that she would do whatever he wanted for him. Jess is horrified and calls Finn a complete pervert, kicking him out of the car and driving off alone. Left with no choice, Finn awkwardly comforts his emotionally wounded stepmom while still in post-nut clarity mode. After calming her down, he makes another excuse and flees for his shitty life. Back at the rehab center, Curtis is cleaning graffiti off a wall when the new intern probation officer, Lola, shows up. She confesses she was the one who did the graffiti, just so she could watch him work. After some flirty banter, she abruptly ends the conversation and walks away, leaving Curtis dazed and very intrigued. That night, when the clone Rudy returned home, he still didn't realize that Rudy had already been taken over by his evil self. It wasn't until he saw the ukulele that he understood the person in front of him wasn't Rudy at all. Alarmed, the clone asked where the real Rudy was. Evil Rudy calmly replied he was right here, inside him. Realizing the danger, the clone made a run for it. But Evil Rudy simply wandered after him, slowly strumming his ukulele while hunting him down, totally deranged. If even Rudy couldn't resist him, the clone stood no chance. Just like that, Evil Rudy absorbed him too. The next day, before work, Finn explained the whole stepmom situation to Jess. He said she wasn't technically his stepmom, just his dad's girlfriend. And what happened the other day was a sudden lapse in judgment. He claimed he had no control over it. Jess wasn't buying any of that nonsense. Surprisingly, it was Rudy, now under Evil Rudy's control, who laid into Finn with some unusually harsh mockery. His sharp words left everyone confused. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the stepmom showed up at the rehab center. She first apologized for what happened, then dove into a passionate love confession, begging Finn to give her a chance. Seeing him hesitate, she pushed further, inviting him over that evening for drinks and a chat. After a moment of hesitation, Finn agreed. Meanwhile, a frustrated Jess, already annoyed by Rudy and Finn, headed to a bar to clear her head. There, she saw Curtis getting cozy with the intern officer Lola. The two noticed Jess's gaze but didn't seem to care. Then the bartender Alex came out. After previously rejecting her, he now took the initiative to strike up a conversation. That's when Jess realized he wasn't actually gay. Curious, she casually invited him over for a drink at her place. But strangely, after initially being friendly, Alex suddenly turned her down again. It felt like he was hiding something. Annoyed and confused, Jess stormed out, only to run into Evil Rudy, who had been waiting for her. Already in a bad mood, Jess didn't want to talk. but evil Rudy kept pressing. She finally snapped, but he just smiled and kept expressing his twisted affection, his choice of words creepy enough to give her goosebumps. Still, he didn't do anything out of line. Instead, he simply said goodbye and watched her leave. The next day, stepmom called Finn. It turns out he'd stood her up the night before. Furious, she told everything to Finn's dad. When Finn tried to explain, his dad tore into him. Then, to top it all off, his dad revealed a bombshell. He wasn't Finn's real father, and Finn had been adopted. At first, Finn thought it was just an angry outburst. He even tried comparing their heights to prove a biological connection. But faced with his father's cold certainty, he had no choice but to accept the truth. Later that day, a wedding was being held at the rehab center. After work, Jess was resting in the lounge when evil Rudy approached her. He confessed he was Rudy's third alter ego and wanted to win her over with honesty. Just as he started opening up, the sound system started blasting all kinds of inappropriate music. Annoyed, evil Rudy stormed off. Suspicious, Jess used her X-ray vision to check on him, only to find him beating up the wedding sound tech. Rushing to intervene, she grabbed a hidden pair of scissors and ran out, only to find evil Rudy already waiting for her. He asked her to dance. In the middle of the dance floor, he pulled her in close, his hand slowly sliding up to her chick neck. He'd always wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone, and he had chosen Jess, someone different from all the others. As his grip tightened and Jess struggled to breathe, she managed to stab him with the scissors. Evil Rudy collapsed. As he lay dying, Jess begged him to release the other two personalities, or they'd die with him. Evil Rudy agreed, but only if she gave him a smelly kiss. With no other choice, Jess leaned in. True to his word, evil Rudy let the others go. Rudy and his clone re-emerged, and the three of them stood silently over evil Rudy's lifeless body, mourning him in their own quiet way. With everything finally over, the group reunited in the changing room. Finn apologized to Jess, admitting he'd been a complete idiot. He asked if she'd give him another chance, but Jess, still reeling from killing evil Rudy, was in no mood for romance. She turned him down. Elsewhere, Curtis and Lola's relationship quickly escalated. They finally hooked up. After an intense night together, Curtis brought out a cake to share with Lola as a snack. What he didn't know was that a dark scheme was already unfolding behind the scenes. The scene shifts to Curtis and Lola dancing at a bar. Suddenly, Lola spots a man at the entrance, and her expression instantly darkens. She excuses herself under the pretense of getting drinks and walks straight over to the man, leading him outside. It turns out this guy named Jake is Lola's ex-boyfriend. He once killed someone for her. After that, she disappeared without a word. Now he's tracked her down, demanding answers. While Jake thinks what they had was love, Lola coldly calls it a hormone transaction. He threatens to expose the murder, but Lola doesn't flinch. Her complete indifference leaves Jake at a loss. After he leaves, Lola, fearing her secret might get out, hatches a plan. She stubs out her cigarette, then slams herself into a wall to fake an injury. Later, Curtis finds her outside. Lola tells him she was attacked by her ex. Back home, Curtis asks who the guy was. Lola sobs about how controlling her ex was, saying he once swore he'd kill her if she ever left. And in this weird world they live in, there seems to be no such thing as police to offer protection. Moved by her tearful act, Curtis promises to protect her no matter what. The next day, Lola gives him a photo of her and Jake, her face scratched out. She claims he's given her an ultimatum: leave with him or die. Curtis decides it's time to confront the guy, and if talking doesn't work, he'll use force. Lola, pretending to be worried for his safety, shoves a gun into his hands. Curtis says he won't need it, but eventually agrees to take it. Using the address Lola gave him, Curtis finds Jake's place. He ambushes him, knocks him to the floor, and points the gun at him, warning him to leave Lola alone. But Jake swears he never hurt her. She made it all up. She even inflicted those wounds on herself. Curtis hesitates. Seizing the moment, Jake lunges for the gun. They struggle, and a shot goes off. Jake drops dead. Panicked, Curtis runs home and scrubs off the blood. Lola comforts him, saying it wasn't his fault, and if he hadn't killed her ex, he would have killed them. Emotions run high, and they end up in bed together. The next morning, Curtis wakes up alone. Lola is gone, with no trace she was ever there. He tries calling her, but gets no answer. Unbeknownst to him, Lola has already moved on to her next target, a random guy with no condom. Confused and worried, Curtis seeks out Officer Greg to ask about Lola's whereabouts. But Greg just stares at him like he's crazy, saying, "There's no intern officer here." He even accuses Curtis of hallucinating from drug use. Sensing danger, Curtis quickly exits the office. He checks with Rudy and the others. They've never even heard of any intern probation officer. Now, fully suspicious of Lola's identity, Curtis sets out to find someone who knows the truth. Little does he know, Jess has already figured out he's in serious trouble. After leaving the rehab center, Curtis arrived at Jake's house, hoping to use his resurrection superpower to bring Jake back to life. But Curtis knew that resurrected Jake would turn into a zombie, so he prepared weapons in advance. After getting the answers he needed, he planned to deal with Jake quickly. Just as he was about to proceed, there was a knock at the door, and to his surprise, it was Rudy. It turns out everyone had noticed something was off with Curtis and had been quietly following him. Curtis had no choice but to let them in. He explained everything about his situation with Lola, as well as his plan, and the group decided to help him out. Curtis instructed Finn to get ready behind Jake, and when the questions were answered, he would deal with him. Once they were ready, Curtis used his superpower to bring Jake back to life. He quickly asked Jake about Lola. Jake revealed that Lola had been in debt to loan sharks. After they started dating, Jake, worried for her safety, confronted the loan sharks and accidentally killed one of them. After that, Lola left him. Jake then told Curtis where her apartment was. Just as they were wrapping up the questions, things went wrong. Jake suddenly went berserk. In the confusion, Finn accidentally knocked out the chandelier. After a chaotic struggle in the dark, Rudy used his phone's flashlight, and together they managed to kill the zombie version of Jake. With the situation calmed down, Rudy suggested they go out for drinks to celebrate, but Curtis wasn't in the mood. During the chaos earlier, Jake had bitten him, and now Curtis was turning into a zombie too. However, before he fully changed, Curtis needed to figure out Lola's true intentions, so he went to the address Jake had given him. To avoid attacking any humans, Curtis stayed clear of crowds and fed on animals to suppress his cravings. After a lot of effort, he finally sneaked into Lola's apartment. To his surprise, there were no signs of life, nothing that indicated someone had been living there. After rummaging through the place, Curtis found a CD with Lola's name on it. He played the disc, only to discover that Lola was an actress. The scene on the disc showed her auditioning for a role where she played the lead female character, a woman who manipulated men. But something strange happened during the audition. A storm hit, and Lola gained some bizarre abilities from it. She could only act according to her character's logic. The twist is that every man Lola gets involved with ends up being killed by her next boyfriend. Now that Curtis knew Lola's biggest secret, he was about to leave when the elevator doors opened, and there she was, standing right in front of him. Curtis told Lola that he knew everything, that her behavior was due to the storm's influence, and that he wanted to help her return to her true self, but Lola wouldn't hear it. She even threatened to expose Curtis's killings. At that moment, Curtis's bloodlust awakened. To avoid hurting Lola, he quickly jumped into the elevator and fled. Back at the rehab center, desperate to control his urges, Curtis grabbed a hamster to satisfy his craving. But when he saw how cute the hamster was, he couldn't bring himself to hurt it. Just then, Greg showed up. Frightened, Curtis tossed the hamster away. Greg heard the noise and came over to investigate. Curtis, struggling to control his cravings, pretended to act gay to annoy Greg, finally managing to send him away. Now that Curtis was finally free to do what he needed, he didn't realize that Rudy had witnessed his feeding on the animals. Curtis told Rudy not to tell anyone, but Rudy quickly went to discuss it with the others. After learning that Curtis was turning into a zombie, the group feared that leaving him unchecked could trigger a zombie outbreak. So they decided to draw straws to determine who would deal with Curtis. Unfortunately for Rudy, he drew the short straw again. When Rudy found Curtis, he was on the rooftop, lost in thought. Upon seeing Rudy ready to kill him, Curtis realized that Rudy must have told the others. However, Curtis still had one last thing to do. He wanted to solve the Lola problem before he went down. Knowing his time was short, Curtis stood up and walked away. In the end, Rudy couldn't bring himself to kill his friend. On the other side, in order to eliminate future risks, Lola once again used a trick to manipulate the situation. She deliberately burned herself with an iron and made sure her random boyfriend saw, blaming it on Curtis. As expected, the familiar scene played out again. Just as Curtis left the rehab center, the random guy knocked him out and took him to an abandoned factory. The random guy threatened him at gunpoint, demanding that he stay away from Lola. But Curtis said the same thing Jake had. Lola was a liar. The random guy didn't listen, though. This time, Lola was even more ruthless. She planned to eliminate both men. During their argument, she appeared from the shadows, knocked the random guy out, and grabbed his gun to take down Curtis. Lola hoped to make it look like the two men were fighting, but by now, Curtis had already turned into a zombie, and bullets couldn't kill him. As Lola staged the scene, Curtis suddenly lunged at her, biting and infecting her, wanting to have a zombie baby with her. In the end, when she became a zombie, he sent her to the afterlife. With everything resolved, Curtis made the decision to end his own life. Before doing so, he called Rudy, who hoped Curtis would come back for a drink and a chat, maybe find another way to solve things. Curtis, however, was at peace with his decision. He told Rudy to take care of himself, hung up, and ended his life with a gun. By now, the original main cast of the Misfits has all left the stage. Although there will be some Easter eggs later, they won't be returning to the rehab center. This is a good time to reflect on their endings. Nathan was caught gambling with his powers and sent to prison. Kelly and Seth went to assist in the African war zones. Alicia died at the hands of the virtue leader. Simon got caught in a time loop. Curtis, having turned into a zombie, took his own life. Now, it's time for the new generation of heroes to take center stage. When Curtis died, Rudy was actually in tears. It's clear that he truly valued the friends around him, and he hopes to continue the story of the superpowered youth with the new team. The scene shifts to Finn, who, ever since learning that he was adopted, has been trying to find his biological father. His only clue is a photo. His birth mother told him that he was the result of an accident at a party, and his real father was in that photo. Since his birth mother was quite notorious in sex, most of the men in the photo were probably involved in shady deals. After some awkward elimination, Finn finally identifies his biological father. The next day, he talks to the others at the rehab center about what it might be like when he meets his father. Rudy thinks Finn's father will try to compensate him, while Sadie is more skeptical about the whole situation. After work that day, Finn runs into the bartender Alex again. Alex apologizes for his previously aloof attitude. When the topic is brought up, Sadie's temper flares. To make it up to her, Alex asks Sadie to punch him out of frustration. True to her straightforward nature, Sadie lands a solid punch right on Alex's nose, making him tear up. Seeing him in such a pitiful state, her anger subsides. Seeing her in a better mood, Alex seizes the opportunity and invites her out on a date. Meanwhile, Finn arrives at the house of the last man in the photo. To his surprise, the person who answers the door is the man's daughter, Grace. The man is critically ill and only survives with medication, but his memory is still intact. He recognizes himself in the photo and remembers having a confrontation with Finn's birth mother at that party. Finn is now certain that this man is his real father. When the man learns that he has suddenly gained a son, he is both shocked and happy. But the next moment, he begins to vomit uncontrollably. The father-son conversation is cut short for now. Despite his father's poor health, Finn still wants to learn more about his current life. He strikes up a conversation with his half-sister, Grace. Finn learns that Grace's mother died in a car accident a few years ago, and now the whole family depends on her to keep things afloat. This revelation makes Finn feel both sympathy and admiration for Grace. After Finn leaves, the man suddenly falls ill again, writhing in pain. Grace uses her superpower to place her hand on his chest, and a flash of white light appears. The man wakes up again. It turns out that Grace's superpower allows her to extend others' lifespans, an incredibly powerful and rare ability. At this point, Finn and Rudy were in the changing room talking about his father's condition. Rudy seemed a bit carefree, even joking about trying to hook up with Grace. Their conversation was overheard by Officer Greg, but instead of comforting Finn, Greg started talking about his own experience when his father passed away. He said his father was a jerk, and when he died, Greg wasn't sad at all. In fact, he was so happy, he danced on his father's grave. Finn, not daring to argue with the man who danced on graves, quietly left the changing room. Later, while working, Finn mentioned to Jess that his biological father had cancer. She noticed a sense of responsibility in Finn's words, which made her view him in a new light. Rudy, however, thought Finn was just using his family's misfortune to gain sympathy and win Jess over. He sarcastically gave him a thumbs up. Finn, of course, liked Jess, but she only wanted to remain friends. So, following Rudy's suggestion, he called her up, offering to help take care of his newly found father and Grace, deliberately letting Jess overhear the conversation to boost his image. He also invited her out for drinks, but Jess had already made plans with Alex. Still, he kept his word and went to visit his father. Just then, Grace had to step out, and the man, seizing the opportunity, told Finn that Grace had been using her superpowers to extend his life. He had been holding on just to avoid leaving his daughter alone, but now that Finn had appeared, he felt he didn't need to keep suffering. He asked Finn to convince Grace to stop using her powers on him, or to at least keep her from going out tonight, so that he could finally rest in peace. Seeing the man's pain, Finn reluctantly agreed. He invited Grace out for drinks, hoping to deepen their sibling bond. Grace, who had been taking care of her father for so long, agreed since she hadn't relaxed in a while. While they were out, Finn and Grace made small talk, but then Finn spotted Alex making a secretive deal with another man. He suspected there might be something more between them, so he convinced Grace to follow them, recording the transaction on his phone. Just then, Rudy called, and the ringing startled the two men. Luckily, Finn used his telekinetic powers to make a can rattle, distracting Alex long enough to avoid detection. Grace was a bit shocked to discover Finn had superpowers, but he didn't have time to explain. He now had the evidence he needed to ruin Jess's date with Alex. So he took Grace to the bar, where Jess was getting cozy with Alex. Finn barged in, interrupting their smelly moment, and when Jess went to the restroom, he showed her the video on his phone. He repeatedly suggested that Alex might be gay. Though Jess acted skeptical, she started to doubt him. To test the theory, she openly declared that she wanted to spend the night at Alex's place. Since so many people were watching, Alex awkwardly agreed to take her home. That night, while Alex was cooking, Jess snuck into his room and checked his closet. To her surprise, she found several flamboyant shirts. Alex caught her in the act, and without hesitation, kissed her to prove his point. However, after that, he didn't make any further moves. Instead, he acted like a gentleman and sent her home without letting go of their hormones, saying he didn't want things to progress too quickly. After Jess left, Alex pulled out a stack of photos of the same man. It turned out that this was the real subject of the deal. Meanwhile, Finn was feeling a bit down, seeing that Jess had been taken away by Alex. Grace comforted him at the bar, and it seemed like the right moment to talk about their father, but just then, Rudy showed up. Upon seeing Grace, he immediately made a move on her. His greasy flirting turned Grace off, and she made an excuse to leave to get some drinks. Finn warned Rudy to stay away from his sister, but Rudy wasn't going to give up that easily. Then, both men noticed that Grace was showing interest in another man at the bar. Finn, feeling a bit smug, told Rudy he was too late. Rudy, wanting to get rid of the competition, spread a rumor that the guy had HIV. Sure enough, Finn overheard and walked over to interrupt the conversation, directly accusing the man of having HIV. The man, understandably furious at the false accusation, gave Finn a HIV-like punch and knocked him out cold. That night, Grace decided to stay at the rehab center. While Rudy was asleep, Finn finally had the chance to bring up their father's wish for Grace to let go. However, Grace didn't really listen. She had already fallen asleep sitting up. Finn had no choice but to settle her down and find a place for himself to sleep. But when he woke up the next morning, Grace was gone. She had already returned home, and by then, her father was nearing death. As Finn entered, he saw Grace trying to use her powers to extend her father's life. He rushed over to stop her, but Grace questioned how Finn, having known her father for only a few days, could possibly understand the bond between father and daughter. She grabbed a book and knocked Finn down before trying to continue using her powers. Finn quickly got up and stopped her again. They struggled, and Grace got the upper hand, pressing Finn's neck down. But in the end, she released him. Seeing Grace break down, Finn comforted her, reminding her that their father had wanted to die for a long time, and cancer had made his life unbearable. Sometimes death really is a release, and even without a father, she still has an older brother. At that moment, the man woke up and whispered to Grace that he had no regrets because he had been able to be her father. He also asked Finn to take care of his sister. With that, Grace finally let go, stopping her powers, allowing her father to peacefully pass away. After this emotional moment, the tone of the show shifted dramatically with an intense scene. Alex cornered a man in a tunnel, not for robbery, but to check out his smelly sausage below the belt. The scene shifts to the Misfit group attending a party. When Rudy leads them inside, the serious atmosphere catches him off guard. He tries to play it off, saying this party is all about depth. Luckily, Jess quickly spots that they've entered the wrong room and pulls everyone out. They finally find the right party. As they walk through the venue, they pass a couple. The man asks the woman how many guys she's slept with, and she replies, 4. That's when a number 11 appears on her forehead. The man sees the number and angrily calls her a horny liar. It turns out that this man has the ability to make people's past sexual partners appear as a number on their forehead. The party had already been underway for some time, and some people were passed out drunk in the hallway. Influenced by the earlier encounter, Rudy and the others soon notice numbers appearing on their own foreheads. Jess and Finn are confused when they see the numbers and wonder what they mean. Rudy, who's always thinking about that stuff, quickly figures out that the number on his forehead represents the number of people he slept with. The others realize the same, but when Rudy sees that Finn has a 1 on his forehead, he can't help but make fun of him. Just then, Alex walks over and he has the number 46 on his forehead. He casually asks if anyone else has this power, leaving everyone stunned. They were surprised he knew about superpowers, but before they could ask more, Alex didn't seem interested in talking further. Jess, seeing his number, gets annoyed and decides to leave, wanting some space to clear her head. Finn follows her, trying to offer some muscle comfort and talk about Alex. But Jess, not in the mood, tells him to go away. Seeing Finn's failure, Rudy decides to teach him a few dating tricks, even demonstrating on a girl he picked up at the party. Just when he was about to take her back to a room for some fun, Rudy suddenly loses interest. He feels that his 100th conquest should be someone special, which frustrates the girl. Just then, Rudy hears a sound from the closet. When he opens it, he finds the host of the party in a daze, muttering about rabbits. At that moment, the elevator doors open, and out steps a giant rabbit with glowing red eyes holding a golf club. It turns out the host is also a superpowered individual. His ability is to turn his hallucinations into reality. The killer rabbit and the golf club were both things he'd seen on TV while high. At the party, the girl with the number 11 on her forehead was trying to leave, but the host had already realized something was off. He blocked her at the door, but she forced her way out. While waiting for the elevator, the creepy rabbit suddenly appeared behind her, and she met her end on the spot. Meanwhile, Rudy returned to the party, ready to pick his 100th hookup. As he looked around, he noticed Finn staring intently at Alex and Jess, who were having a heated moment. Seeing Finn so infatuated with Jess, Rudy decided to take him somewhere else to distract him and help him forget about her. But there was a problem. Finn just couldn't attract the type of girls Rudy was used to, and he refused to sleep with a drunk girl. Rudy figured Finn might need a less challenging environment and suggested a funeral happening in the same building. It seemed perfect, low pressure, and he could find a more suitable girl. They were on the same page. As soon as they stepped outside, they found a girl named Abby passed out on the ground. Finn wanted to take care of her first, but Rudy gave him no choice but to help carry her heavy body inside. They decided to put Abby in the bathtub to help her sober up. Meanwhile, Jess and Alex had patched things up, showing that good looks definitely have their perks. The two of them started flirting at the bar, and with the help of some alcohol, they found a room to get a little sweaty. But just as things were heating up, Alex suddenly had second thoughts and tried to back out. Jess, frustrated, got dressed and walked out. If Alex couldn't satisfy her even for 2 minutes, then she'd find someone who could. She immediately hooked up with the same guy from earlier, the one with the number showing his past hookups, but just as they were chatting, Alex chased after her. Jess, not wanting to deal with him, quickly left the party. Back at the funeral, Rudy decided to give Finn some game advice and picked out a girl with curly hair who was crying her eyes out. Seizing the opportunity, Rudy comforted her using his muscles and quickly won her over, knowing her name, Nadine. Just when he was about to take things further, the girl glanced at the time, suddenly remembered something important, and rushed out. After the failed attempt, Rudy looked around for someone else, but there were no girls that caught his interest. He checked on Finn, who still hadn't made any progress, though he had eaten plenty of snacks. Noticing Rudy's lack of success, Finn finally took a shot at mocking him, but Rudy shrugged it off and went outside to search for that girl. As he stepped out, he found someone lying on the ground, none other than the girl who had met her end earlier. Her gruesome death startled Rudy, and just then the rabbit killer struck, attacking him from behind. Though Rudy wasn't a match for the rabbit, he was quick on his feet. Despite being chased, he managed to escape into the elevator. Once the doors closed, he was safe, for now. On the other side, a blonde beauty took an interest in Finn and walked over to start a conversation. Finn, starving for attention, didn't hesitate and quickly found a room with her to get some sweaty exercise. 2 minutes later, just as they finished, Rudy crawled out from under the bed and told Finn about his encounter with the rabbit killer. The two set off to check out the situation at the party, but Finn alone wasn't enough, so Rudy tried to rally others to help deal with the rabbit. They found Alex at the party and told him about the killer rabbit. Alex assumed they were hallucinating from drugs. Just then, the party host overheard their conversation and admitted that his powers had gone out of control. He revealed that the rabbit was a deadly super killer. Alex finally realized things were serious, especially since Jess had just left on her own. Everyone quickly headed out to search for her. Meanwhile, Jess, still fuming, was crying by a wall when the rabbit killer quietly crept up behind her. She screamed in a chicken voice, but before she could do anything, she was knocked out and taken away. Luckily, Abby, who had just woken up, heard the scream and saw the whole scene through the peephole. She rushed to open the door, but by the time she did, both Jess and the rabbit were gone. To alert the others, she turned off the music and broadcasted the news to the entire party. Most people didn't take it seriously, but Rudy and the others listened to Abby's warning. They confirmed Jess was the one who had been taken and decided to team up with Abby to search for her. After getting in the elevator, they noticed bloodstains on the buttons, which led them to the basement. To keep Abby safe, they left her behind while they ventured further. The three men began their search, but the rabbit was lying in wait. He first took down Rudy, then knocked Finn unconscious. The rabbit killer was about to finish off the unconscious Jess when Alex intervened, saving her. Unfortunately, Alex wasn't a match for the rabbit either, and just as the killer was about to finish him off, a scream rang out. Abby had stabbed the rabbit killer from behind, saving everyone in the nick of time. After rescuing Jess, the group first found the party host and warned him to stop using illegal substances. Then, the three went up to the rooftop to chat. Rudy confessed that he couldn't stop thinking about the girl he saw at the funeral, saying that he thought he might be in love with her. Abby said maybe it was fate. With that, Abby became more involved with the group of superpowered teens. Though whether it was a blessing or a curse for her, we'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, Jess and Alex were treating their wounds. Taking advantage of the moment, Jess decided to confront Alex. She couldn't handle his hot and cold attitude anymore and wanted to break up for good. Faced with losing his girlfriend, Alex immediately stripped off his stinky pants. That's when Jess realized that Alex didn't have the parts she expected. It turned out Alex had been targeted by another superpowered person. A woman, wanting to become a man, used her powers to swap out Alex's prized but smelly possession. Alex swore he'd find that person and get his private parts back. Jess finally understood Alex's pain, and instead of being disgusted, she promised not to tell anyone about it as a way to comfort him. The scene shifts to Jess and Alex once again, unable to resist each other and hugging. When Jess instinctively tried to remove Alex's pants, the mood quickly turned awkward, and the two sat in silence on the bed. In the end, Alex hired a private investigator to find the person who stole his smelly parts. One day, a group of expectant mothers came into the rehab center, and Rudy and Finn were left bored, watching them go through prenatal care. This used to be Rudy's favorite thing to watch, but ever since he fell for Nadine at the funeral, everything else seemed uninteresting. Back in the locker room, the two bumped into Abby, who was sleeping on the floor. Just then, Officer Greg came in for a checkup. Seeing Abby, Greg assumed she was one of Rudy's hired sex workers and started looking at her disapprovingly. When Greg started getting upset, Finn quickly thought of an excuse and told Greg that Abby was there for community service. But Greg, as the probation officer, didn't know about her arrival yet. He made Finn vouch for Abby, warning him that if she caused any trouble, Finn would be held accountable. When Greg left, Abby thought about leaving too, but Finn begged her to stay. So Abby reluctantly put on a work uniform and pretended to do community service. Meanwhile, Rudy, now completely infatuated with Nadine, was distracted and didn't feel like working. He noticed Jess browsing on her phone and, without hesitation, snatched it from her. To his surprise, Jess was searching for information on gender reassignment. To protect Alex's secret, Jess lied, claiming she was considering gender reassignment surgery to experience being a man, and Rudy, completely fooled, let it slide. After finishing work, the group decided to head to a bar. Abby wanted to use the restroom first, asking the others to go ahead, and she'd join them shortly. Inside the restroom, Abby ran into a pregnant woman who seemed unprepared for the whole pregnancy and childbirth thing. Abby wanted to comfort her, but just then, the woman's superpower activated, and she transferred her baby into Abby's belly. Forced to go along with it, Abby had no choice but to walk into the bar with a suddenly grown belly. The others were shocked to see Abby pregnant out of nowhere. Abby shared her experience with the group and insisted they had to find the woman and return the baby to her. Rudy, ever the troublemaker, couldn't resist teasing Jess. He asked if Alex knew about his plans to transition. Then he pretended he was about to spill the beans to Alex. Jess, panicking, revealed Alex's secret to Rudy. Rudy got excited, but Jess threatened him to keep it quiet, so Rudy reluctantly returned to his seat, holding back his excitement. The next day, Abby went to see the pregnancy administrator, hoping to get the address of the pregnant woman, but the administrator refused, citing confidentiality. Just as Abby was about to leave in disappointment, Finn heard about her situation and decided to help. Using his telekinetic abilities, Finn put in all his effort and managed to spill coffee on the administrator. While the administrator was away to clean up, the two snuck off with her computer. They were about to leave when they ran into Greg. Seeing Abby's big belly, Greg assumed Finn was the father. Finn quickly denied it and made a quick escape before Greg could catch on. After finding the address, the group went to look for the woman. When they arrived and the woman opened the door, Abby suddenly disappeared. They found her downstairs shortly after. Abby explained that she wanted to keep the baby. It turned out that Abby had also been affected by the storm and had lost her memory. She had been searching for someone who recognized her for a long time but had no luck. Once she got pregnant, it was the first time she felt truly needed, which gave her the motivation to continue living. Everyone understood and didn't press the issue any further. Back at the rehab center, Alex and Jess were back to their old routine. Seeing them, Finn immediately felt down and began complaining non-stop. Rudy decided to comfort Finn by revealing Alex's secret. When Finn heard it, he suddenly perked up, his confidence restored. But Abby pointed out that Jess would rather choose a man without private parts than stay with Finn. That hit Finn hard, and he fell back into a gloomy mood. He trudged back to the rehab center, defeated. To cheer Finn up, Rudy jokingly pinned down his own little buddy and pretended to be Alex to make him laugh. Just then, Alex walked into the bathroom and caught Rudy in the act. Seeing his secret exposed, Alex angrily confronted Jess, accusing her of breaking their promise. Their relationship was on the rocks. Jess, enraged, stormed into the bathroom and attacked Rudy with a fierce blow to his private parts, knocking him to the ground. Meanwhile, Greg noticed that Abby wasn't on the list of juvenile offenders at the center, but since she was pregnant, he decided not to investigate further. Elsewhere, after Alex's secret was exposed, he went home to drown his sorrows in alcohol. Jess, trying to salvage their relationship, kept calling him, but Alex refused to answer. Just then, the private investigator brought new information about the person who took Alex's parts. The investigator showed Alex a photo and revealed that the person was a regular at a bar. Furious, Alex grabbed a gun, preparing to confront her. The private investigator tried to stop him, but Alex knocked him out cold. Meanwhile, Jess, frustrated by Alex ignoring her calls, decided to go to his house. The others were chatting at the rehab center when Rudy suddenly heard someone calling his name. Turning around, he saw Nadine, the girl he had been thinking about. Seeing her, Rudy quickly asked Finn and Abby to leave so he could talk to Nadine. He had previously told her he was a probation officer at the rehab center, but now he had to keep that lie up to prevent his real identity from being exposed. After a brief conversation, Rudy couldn't keep up the facade any longer and confessed to Nadine that he wasn't the probation officer. He poured his heart out, and Nadine forgave him. She kissed him as a gesture of love. Just as they were getting closer, Nadine suddenly seemed to remember something. She rushed out of the room, and Rudy couldn't catch up in time. But then he had an idea, called his friends, and decided to follow her. They tracked her down, and to Rudy's surprise, Nadine had changed into a nun's habit and entered a convent. It turned out Nadine was actually a nun. On the other side, Jess finally arrived at Alex's doorstep, only to be greeted by the private detective who had been knocked out by Alex earlier. The detective revealed that Alex had become increasingly unhinged in his obsession to reclaim his prized possession. Hearing this, Jess rushed to the bar. By this time, Alex had already arrived and was searching for his target in the crowd. Soon after, Jess and the group who had been following Nadine also arrived at the bar. As they searched for Alex, Officer Greg took the stage and passionately performed a song. To everyone's surprise, Greg's singing was quite impressive. He performed a heartfelt rock ballad that captivated the whole room. The crowd was completely entranced by his performance. The only person who wasn't interested in Greg's singing was Alex, who had finally found his target. Alex immediately shoved her against the wall, pulled out a gun, and threatened to blow her brains out if she didn't return his smelly sausage. Just as the confrontation escalated, Jess showed up in time and told Alex to put down the gun and talk it out. In that brief moment of hesitation, the sausage hunter seized the opportunity, grabbed a bottle, shattered it, and pointed the sharp shards toward her own private parts, threatening to cut off Alex's prized possession if he didn't lower his weapon. The tension in the air was palpable. Alex began a countdown from 5, promising to shoot if his little sausage wasn't returned by the end of it. The sausage hunter didn't budge, and by the time Alex reached 0, she still hadn't given in. As the countdown ended, instead of shooting her, Alex aimed the gun at himself. He didn't want to live as a freak anymore and was willing to end it all right there. Seeing Alex's despair, the sausage hunter finally realized the significance of the little stick to a man. Softening, she reluctantly returned it to Alex. With his manhood restored, Alex immediately took Jess back to his room to see if the homecoming bird could still fly high. The two had a successful night together, but throughout it all, Alex seemed more focused on admiring his recovered treasure in the mirror than caring for Jess's feelings. The next day, Abby, still sporting her fake pregnancy belly, arrived at the rehab center, only to be confronted by the real mother of the baby she had carried. The woman wanted her child back. Abby had planned to refuse, but she was moved by the woman's genuine love for her child and decided to return the baby to its rightful mother. Heartbroken and disillusioned, Abby decided to leave the center and search for a new purpose. Just as she was about to walk out, Greg stopped her. Realizing Abby wasn't really pregnant, he declared that by impersonating a juvenile delinquent, Abby had broken the law. She was now a real juvenile delinquent and would have to stay and work at the rehab center as punishment. The scene shifts to Nadine sitting in a church, reading a book about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. A senior nun walks in and tells Nadine that a young man is outside looking for her. It's none other than Rudy. Although Rudy had changed into formal attire for the occasion, his eccentric personality still irritated the other nuns. Rudy came with the simple question, was there any chance left for them? Hearing this, Nadine was torn, but eventually she told Rudy that she had already pledged her life to God and hoped they would never meet again. Rudy had imagined countless scenarios, but he never expected his greatest rival to be Jesus. He stumbled for words, but in the end he couldn't think of anything to say that would change her mind and left in sorrow. As he walked away, Nadine watched him leave, unwilling to let go, and the older nun noticed it. Back at the rehab center, the previously carefree Rudy began to believe in Jesus, hoping that he would somehow bring Nadine back to him. Rudy was heartbroken, and things weren't going smoothly for Jess either. After Alex had his smelly sausage back, he found that it wasn't quite as good as it used to be. Alex treated it with more care than Jess, maintaining it like a prized possession. This made Jess feel very neglected. Influenced by their struggles, the group was unusually quiet during work. When Officer Greg came around for a checkup and saw how downcast they all were, he wanted to scold them. But after hearing about their tragic love stories, he decided not to be harsh and instead gave them some encouragement. Meanwhile, Rudy wasn't the only one still hung up on the past. After their last parting, Nadine also found herself missing Rudy. Unable to suppress her feelings any longer, she decided to secretly sneak out and find him. When they met again, there was an awkwardness between them. Rudy felt like he wasn't worthy of this pure and innocent girl. He confessed his past mistakes, but Nadine didn't care about that. She kissed him deeply, putting his worries to rest. With Nadine's understanding, Rudy finally let go of the past, and the two leaned into each other, sharing their feelings. After meeting Rudy, Nadine began to question her faith for the first time, but Rudy felt she shouldn't give up on her beliefs, as long as she could be there with him. They were so caught up in each other that they didn't notice the danger creeping in. At that moment, the church's nuns discovered that Nadine had snuck out, and they came to bring her back. Just as they arrived, Rudy had gone to the bathroom, and the nuns took this opportunity to charm Nadine and return her to the church. When Rudy returned and found that Nadine was gone, he assumed she had run back to the church just like before. The next day, he gathered his friends to come up with a plan. Encouraged by the others, Rudy decided to take matters into his own hands. Even Officer Greg, upon hearing this sad story, gave Rudy his blessing and even shared some advice, encouraging him to be brave. It seemed that Greg, too, had his own story. So Rudy went to the church once again to find Nadine. This time, the nuns weren't so kind and refused his request to see her. Rudy was forced to leave and rethink his approach. On his way out, he realized that Nadine was actually being kept under house arrest by the nuns. Rudy wanted to rush in and save her, but the church's large gates were not something he could easily budge. At that moment, he knew there was only one option left. He had to go back to the rehab center to gather reinforcements. The group assembled once again to head to the church, putting everything on the line for Rudy's happiness. Finn unlocked his hidden potential to open the gates, even causing his ears to bleed from overusing his powers. Once inside, Jess used her X-ray vision to give them warnings about patrolling nuns while searching for the room where Nadine was kept. But despite their efforts, a nun spotted them. Luckily, Rudy reacted quickly and resolved the crisis with a well-timed headbutt. With everyone's persistence, Rudy successfully rescued Nadine. After all the struggles, Nadine finally broke free from the constraints of her vows and, with Rudy, started working out together on the rooftop. Rudy wasn't the only one making progress in their love life. Abby, due to her memory loss, needed someone to lean on emotionally, and her solution was to sleep first and talk about feelings later. So, Abby invited the only single guy, Finn, to work out with her. Being the eternal bachelor, Finn naturally had no reason to decline. Meanwhile, after Nadine's situation was resolved, Jess wanted to share her experiences with Alex, but she ended up catching him in bed with another woman. Needless to say, their relationship was over. Jess, upset and hurt, wanted to talk to Finn, only to run into Abby and Finn, who had just finished working out. Yesterday, Finn had been interested in her, but today, he was in another woman's bed. Jess stormed off in anger, and Finn rushed after her to explain. Abby tried to help explain, but the more they spoke, the messier things got, and Jess angrily called Abby a bitch. At that moment, Finn realized that Jess did care about him, but just as things were about to escalate, Alex came over to explain the earlier situation. When Finn heard Alex had been messing around behind Jess's back, he was furious and wanted to confront him, but Alex knocked him out with a punch. After that, Nadine and Rudy arrived on the scene, and Nadine saw everything. As the lights in the room flickered, it became clear that Nadine was also a superpowered being. After the storm, she had gained the ability to summon the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Whenever she witnessed cruelty or violence, the 4 horsemen would appear. Realizing the gravity of the situation, everyone quickly hid, but they were unfortunate enough to run into the horsemen on their way out. However, they looked somewhat underwhelming. These 4 horsemen, riding Tesla bicycles rather than Ferrari horses, were surprisingly unimpressive. Seeing the horsemen approaching, the group ran back to the rehab center and locked the door. But despite their unimpressive appearance, these so-called 4 horsemen were still formidable. Unable to get in through the door, they broke in through the roof. With the situation growing more dire, everyone split up to escape. Abby didn't get far before one of the horsemen caught up with her. Just as the horseman was about to execute her, Finn stepped in. In a panic, his superpowers activated, and he knocked the horseman into the door. Seizing the opportunity, Finn pulled Abby up, and they continued fleeing. Meanwhile, Alex and Jess had taken refuge in the changing room. When the horsemen arrived, Alex was stabbed while trying to protect Jess. Seizing the chance, Jess used a fire extinguisher to strike the horseman from behind and finally managed to send him running. After the danger temporarily passed, Jess hurried back to tend to Alex's wound. The others were quickly followed by more horsemen. When they saw Alex bleeding profusely, everyone panicked, unsure of how to help. Without immediate medical attention, Alex would die. In a moment of desperation, Jess came up with a grim idea. Since the four horsemen were Nadine's power, they would disappear if she were to die. Seeing Alex's condition, Nadine felt immense guilt and was ready to sacrifice herself to save everyone. But Rudy stopped her. He told Nadine that he shouldn't have brought someone as pure as her into this chaotic place and that he was the true culprit. Jess, moved by Rudy's sincerity, set aside the idea of sacrificing Nadine and instead rallied everyone to stand up to the horsemen. The group, motivated by their desire to protect Nadine, stood by her side. Nadine didn't want to see anyone else sacrificed for her. She told them it's been wonderful knowing them and ran out. When they chased after her, they found that Nadine had already been captured by the horsemen, who began their apocalyptic judgment on her. After Nadine's death, the four horsemen vanished. Rudy, holding Nadine's fading body, was overcome with grief. After kissing her forehead, Rudy finally came to terms with the reality of her death. Along with Finn, they buried Nadine. Once everything settled, the group sat together on the rooftop, comforting Rudy in his sorrow. During this time, everyone had their own troubles, but Abby, with her memory loss, remained as optimistic as ever. She sat on one of the bikes left by the four horsemen, as if she was recalling something. At that moment, Jess answered a phone call and learned that the injured Alex needed a transplant surgery. Now, Alex, lying on a hospital bed, was about to receive a whole new superpower.